read Dune Messiah. It's the sequel to Dune, the original. Anyways, it didn't take me as long. I kind of read it in like 3 days. Anyways, I've just been wanting to get a time to actually go live and talk about it. But the basic plot of this one is the so Paul is now the emperor of the universe or emperor of the galaxy, whatever it is. So yeah, that's and everybody's thinking he's way too powerful because of all the political power he has, all the different tricks that he learned through his motherly training with the Bene Gesserit order and whatnot. And then he also has the gift of the foresight, and he can also read people. He's basically Darth Vader, but kind of the good guy. I don't know, but still, or not Darth Vader, the Emperor, but like he's the good guy. I don't know. Anyway, so the plot of the book is that there's now an assassination plot going through that involves like a shapeshifter, a fish person, the old Reverend Mother, and a few and a dwarf of all people, and then yeah, so that's basically it. But Paul's always one step ahead because he can see into the future and he can read people really well. And it's once again, it's like the Julius Caesar kind of thing where it's like, oh, gee, who's the bad guy? Who's really the bad guy here? And it's kind of like everybody's kind of the bad guy, and it's but like you're always relating to Paul more because he's he's the main character of the book. Anyways, then also Paul and his wife Chani, or not his wife, his concubine Chani are trying to conceive a child because at the end of the book of the original Dune, it was said that he would marry the princess, but only to get himself political power, and he would never actually consummate their marriage or ever give her a loving look or anything, and that he would only give his love to the woman he loved, which is Chani. So that's still, but then of course the princess Irulan has been feeding them contraceptives so that they don't conceive. So now it's been 12 years. I guess they're about 30 now, and they haven't conceived. So then they're still trying to. Shawnee's going into all these natural kind of ways to become more fertile, which I mean, why wasn't she doing that 6 to 8 years ago is beyond me. But still, anyways, that's the basic plot of the book. I guess if you think about the next book called Children of DUNE, you kind of know how one of the plots and the plot channels ends with their conception, right? So anyways, all right, so let's see. So looking at this, we have Paul struggles with his godhood, losing friends to his followers, right? So that's one thing. Like he had his friend Stilgar, but then once Paul started becoming more like a god, because whenever he was seeing into the future, he saw all roads where he didn't act as a god would lead to a lot of genocide and everything. But like the genocide still happens, and he's still just acting like a god. So it's like, how much use is this actually? How useful is his foresight actually? And it's interesting thing about that, because it's clear to everybody who's close and personal to him that he actually considers their friends and not his friend and not a follower, that he like absolutely is not okay with being the godhood or whatever, the lowercase g god of the universe. But I don't know. Anyways, many characters long for the days of living under a rock in the desert. Some conspirators were free men. Yeah, as you see, like that was, yeah, that was it. That's yeah. It wasn't Stilgar who was doing that, but a lot of the other free men who went on the jihad, as they said, which was like the intergalactic spreading of the religion, where they put Paul at the where they put Paul as the god, and they all just took. He never told them to go on a jihad and go spread his word across the galaxy, but they did. So it's one, and he said that was completely out of his control, that he couldn't do it, that there was nothing he could do about it. So once again, But or maybe he did do it. He's not telling us, being an unreliable. I don't know. It is a told in third person, so he's not the narrator. So it's hard to say if Paul really intended for that or not. Well, I don't think he did. Then there was this whole thing with Duncan, Idaho. Yeah, I thought Duncan was like this minor character from the first book that got killed. But anyway, so apparently what happened when he got killed was they shipped his body off to some cloners, which are called like the telomeres. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that. Um, they they got shipped off to those guys, and they went off and like regrew his flesh because it wasn't like a technical cloning, because I don't know. And then the whole plot with it, there's like a subplot there the where you learn at the very end that the what do you call it, the shapeshifter and the dwarf were working together because they were telomeres or whatever it is, and they were trying to see if you could clone somebody and have them actually have the clone actually become one with their previous memories and thoughts and everything. And then, of course, their plot was to have Duncan like respond to certain word cues to go assassinate Paul. And then that's how they got everybody else in the conspiracy. But there's like a conspiracy within a conspiracy right here to see if they can use Duncan to make everybody think they're going to use Duncan to assassinate Paul. But then because Duncan was really close to Paul and saw him as his own son, they thought like, okay, well, there's a chance that this will trigger that there's something that the previous Duncan Idaho would not do, that his clone would be so against that it would trigger the real Duncan Idaho to step forth and become one with the clone, and kind of like, and through this process they could like achieve immortality or something stupid like that. But anyways, it was good. Let's see. Paul is always one head step ahead of the conspiracy. Yeah, he's kind of like, he's the kind of guy that, it's like, it's actually, you didn't think this conspiracy was ever going to succeed because Paul's too powerful, where it's just the kind of thing where it would actually be a compelling novel, like if Paul was actually the bad guy and these other people making all the conspiracy were actually the good guys. And it's like, can they actually pull it off? That's like what your question is. But yeah, it was like, but they kind of had that whole thing where it's like you kind of knew they weren't going to pull it off, but then they partially succeeded, I guess. Which how they partially succeeded was they at one point like tricked Paul into going to a house to talk to a previous freeman that was part of his like honor guard, and then while he was leaving they nuked the place, or didn't nuke, like they did, I forget what it was called. It was like a, I forget what it was like called, like something. Yeah, I forget what they called the, it wasn't a nuclear bomb, but it was like, it was a nuclear device, and it basically blinded everybody who was around. So but it was also similar to like, if you looked into Star Wars, it would be like similar to the Death Star kind of thing, where it's a laser kind of thing, but if you see the laser, you go blind because it's so bright and whatnot. And that they could use these if it had more fuel. They did talk about how if it had a little bit more fuel, it could have gone through the crust and caused a total planet-wide like geological event where everything just goes, where the planet just dies. But anyways, I don't think it would explode. It would just, there, all the crust and everything would have so many tectonic activity that there would be earthquakes and just everything would be ugly. But that's not what happened. They didn't get through the crust. They just did that pretty much just to blind Paul, I think. So then Paul's blind. So that's about 3/4 of the way into the book. He becomes blind, but then he can actually, using his foresight or his third eye, whatever you want to call it, he just sees and can talk to everybody, and everybody's freaked out because they see his blind eyes and he's just running around like everything's normal. Like, yeah, so there's that. Um, the whole, let's see, yeah. So then they have that, but then of course that's part of the Freeman culture, where if you become blind, you are to be left in the desert to die. So then that's ultimately he's able to keep this tradition. He's able to break this tradition for a little bit, but in the end, that's what he chooses to do, is to go off into the desert blind, because once his children are born, he like loses his ability to have sight. So there's that. The whole thing was quite depressing because nobody was having a good time. Ending was good, and however, the ending was predictable because the sequel is named Children of DUNE. Yeah, okay, I already went over that, but yeah, he really stuck the landing on the ending. It was a really good ending. It was like kind of hopeful, happy. I don't know, even though the main character and his wife and I guess Johnny, they both die, but it's like kind of like he sees it as like, finally I get to be relieved of all these burdens, and we finally get to be happy. Like, the whole thing is pretty depressing until the end, and then he really sticks the landing because yeah, like once again, the conspirators aren't having a good time. They all are trying to conspire against each other, and then like Paul's not having a good time being emperor. People treating him like a god. He doesn't like that. He's always trying to see like 3 steps ahead of people, and it's yeah. But I give it like 3 out of 5 stars, I would say. So let's go into different characters. So Skytail, yeah, he first comes off as kind of an idiot, but then it's like, oh, he's actually really smart. Skytail would be the shape shifting person from the cloning factory, the telomeres. I don't know, but still, yeah, um, he was the one on behind the plot of seeing, oh, can we actually bring the actual Duncan, Idaho forth in the clone? Yeah. The Fishman. So, oh yeah, the Fishman. Like apparently, people who drive starships need to are like kind of evolved like little flippers on their hands and feet, and they just sit around in their tanks and wait around in these big tanks as they drive starships and whatnot. And then these tanks are full of spice, which gives them foresight. Yeah, that's something I'll talk about that a little bit later. We have the old Reverend Mother, which is a pitiful relic, I guess. Yeah, that's what you can say. She she's this kind of she gets played the fool a lot, and it's like kind of just being like, oh, she's part of this previous dynasty that no longer is, and she's still trying to live it as though she was in charge, but she should just really just accept the new rule. Irulin, which is the name of the princess, she's not. She's I have written that she's not the smartest character around. Which I mean, it was quite obvious she wasn't. I think in the end, she ends up liking the 2 children of Chani and Paul, and then chooses to raise them, and is completely regrets being part of a conspiracy to kill Paul. Anyways, even though Paul like because I get it the whole time, I think she was just jealous of Chani. Um, Paul very accepting of his destiny. Yeah, whenever Paul, that's something I still like that we like about Paul is that he's very brave. Is that he whenever he sees something happening that isn't part of his foresight, like say the Fishman, like because they're so into the spice thing, he can't see them in his foresight, and there's other things he can't see, and he kind of knows there's a conspiracy going on around him. And then he just anytime there's something that isn't part of his visions, he kind of just walks into it wholly accepting, like let this be the true moment where I am smoked down, or maybe I'll win. Like it's yeah, he just doesn't even know. He doesn't know what's going to happen, but he still just completely accepts his destiny. He completely accepts what's going to happen, and he puts his heart fully into it. And that's something that's really good about his character. Is that a lot of times you would think somebody who's so used to predicting the future all the time, you would think they would eventually become a coward, where anytime they don't see something every time that something happens they don't see ahead of time, they would just start freaking out and go get as far away from it as possible. But he just kind of accepts it and walks like full into it. Like he didn't know anything about the conspiracy, especially the stuff around Duncan, Idaho. But then maybe he did. I don't know. But still, like for example, in the pivotal moment, whenever Duncan, Idaho was given the word to assassinate Paul, and it was supposed to be his training or what it was like some unconscious training that he received that he would do this on these words. like the trigger words, like I don't know, it's like kind of like the idea with the Russian spies, if you ever heard about that, like the Russian spies that, oh, once they hear like a phrase like what a green ice cream truck or something, just stupid, just something random, that all of a sudden that would initiate the Russian spy in them, and then they would go around and cause havoc. But that's the same idea with Duncan, Idaho, except I think it was something around Chauncey's death that Paul would say something to Duncan, and then that would trigger his assassination. So Paul goes out and says this exact thing, and that with his back turned to him and everything, like it's like almost like he knew exactly what to say, and they knew exactly what was going to happen, and then but then Duncan couldn't assassinate him because the real Duncan came forth and said, "No, I'm not going to assassinate this guy. I think that I treat more like my son." So then, of course, Duncan's clone is like a lot younger, and it's kind of weird that he falls in love with Paul's younger sister, Aaliyah, who's like 16, I think, in this book. But once again, that's kind of weird, but more on that whenever I talk about Children of Dune. Anyways, so yeah, that's good. So yeah, whether or not Paul actually saw that moment with Duncan coming forth, whether or not he foresaw that, or if he was just he knew that this was probably the moment he would get assassinated, and just like, please, just if you're gonna assassinate me, just do it. And it's like, but then he doesn't. He's like, oh, how about that? How about that outcome? Let's go. Let's go. Continue, right? Yeah. So then Johnny. Oh wait, Aaliyah. Basically, it's I don't know. I didn't really find her character very interesting at all. So basically, Aaliyah, if you remember from the previous book, she is this girl who was born with full consciousness. So she was talking at like maybe as soon as her teeth came in, I guess she was talking. And not only was she talking, she was able to have full on like adult conversations that pick up on mannerisms and stuff. So yeah, and then like um but basically she can see into the future just like Paul, except she's just from the beginning. Paul has, I don't know, I guess you can see her as like more the complete version of Paul. I don't know, but they do kind of do like with that where she's really good at sword fighting, I guess. And like they do that one scene where she's at in the training room going on the training bots at like a really high level, and she gets in trouble because she could actually die from playing against the training bots at that level. But like it's just, once again, it's a sci-fi fantasy where it's like, oh yeah, we have this one chick who's just really good at sword fighting, really good at it's just, I don't know, it's a trope that's just kind of just makes me roll my eyes. But anyways, uh oh yeah, she does do an overdose because she's trying to see into the future, so she like overdoses on spice at one point. That's about that. Like she's trying too hard to see into the future all the time, and especially as Chani's having the kids, I think she's losing her powers a bit too. But Chani doesn't think she's enough for Paul. One of very few of Paul's actual friends. Yeah, like she's the one person that Paul can actually relate to. I think that's why Paul just basically said, "I'll go out in the desert and die once Chani died." So yeah, there's that. Doesn't think she's enough for Paul. Yeah, they have this scene where like whenever she wasn't conceiving for Paul, she's like, "You should just go get a child with the princess." And like Paul just like, "No, that will only cause trouble." Which, I mean, okay, it's a really good conversation between them. That's in the beginning of the book. They had that conversation. Stilgar, who basically his arc was he started out as Paul's friend, but then he becomes a follower, a believer in the whole religion, the faux religion that they build around Paul. We have Donkey. He's a Duncan. I mean, yeah, zombie to be reminded of who he is. Paul never lost faith. Yeah, I wrote that. I guess that is how I felt like the whole time. Paul, I think, felt that the whole time that Duncan could be brought forth in this zombie or this clone. Dwarf. Basically, the dwarf is kind of, I see him as kind of like a comic relief kind of character where he actually talks and rhymes like you would expect a leprechaun, and he's also pulling tricks on everybody like you would expect that would be a leprechaun. He gets strangled in the end, but that's about it. basically, yeah. Then you had the whole ending scene. I'll talk about the final scene, which I guess you would equate to a throne room scene, except it's the scene in the right after the birth of the two twins of Paul and Johnny. They basically, Paul and Johnny have these two twins, and then Johnny dies in childbirth. Meanwhile, Paul was not in the room while that happened, and that's when Duncan was trying. That's when Paul thought that Duncan was going to kill him, but then they didn't. So they walked into the room, and then of course they're like, "Oh, do invite the shapeshifter," because like Paul saw the shapeshifter pulling all his tricks, and like, "Hey, that guy's the shapeshifter," and basically says, "Hey, invite this other person here who I know is a shapeshifter," and then basically shapeshifter starts like threatening the baby's lives if you don't give away Paul's Johnny's body to go be distorted and cloned, and it's like give us a lot of money to do that, and it was like that's like the whole yeah, it's like the whole time it's like his conspiracy was like, oh yes, let's go have the emperor family, let's go have somebody die in the emperor family so that we can clone them and go through this arduous process of bringing them back and then actually have their personhood be brought forth back into their body through this long, arduous process, which we can charge them for a lot of money. And it's like that's the whole time. It's like, oh, that's just what this whole plot was about, was just getting a lot of money. Anyways, but anyway, so like this guy's threatening the babies. This shapeshifter guy, he's threatening the babies. But then Paul, who, whenever the babies were born, lost his actual sight. But then one of the babies opened its eyes and Paul could see through the baby's eyes, and then he was able to see himself standing on the other side of the room, so that he picked up a knife that was right next to him and threw the knife right at the shapeshifter and hit him in the face. So that was a pretty intense scene, but still. So theme and symbol, okay, I guess like he really went into the spice a lot more, like the idea of the spice being part of like being able to be associated with a foresight, and the idea that and how the spice is related to religion. Now it's like it's a physical connection to their religion, like it's all based on spice. So if you were to take the spice away, their religion would completely fall. But the spice actually does give them like foresight powers and stuff that people would see as mystical and spiritual. So yeah, basically the idea that if you have this physical connection to the religion, it leads to tyranny, basically because because all of a sudden it's like, I think he made the quote in the first book was, he who can destroy something controls it. So Paul could destroy all the spice at any point by like putting too much water in the desert, and then that would disrupt the cycle because the giant worms make the spice, and the have something to do with making the spice. They never really get into it, the detail, but still, so the giant worms make the spice, but however, the giant worms are all allergic to water, and then they die. And if they were to die, there'd be no more spice. So then he just says he who can destroy something controls it. So then basically, if this whole thing if the whole religion and everything is based around spice, if you can control the spice, you control the religion, you control law, you control the politics. He basically controls everything. So yeah, then so that's why you really shouldn't have like this like physical connection to religion. Yeah. A lot of let's see. Then we also like there's this whole genetic ethics that they keep bringing up with like how disgusting the steered the fish person is in his tank, like how disgusting he is, and then how it's like unethical that that they genetically modify these people to do just this one task, and then keep them addicted to drugs their whole life just to drive spaceships around. And then what else would there be? Yeah, then of course they also go on to like the Duncan, Idaho thing where they resurrect his corpse, and it's like that's also brought out as like a really disgusting thing, and how the free men, whenever you lose your eyes, you're supposed to go out there, but then if people get fake eyes, they like, but then it's like, is the fake eyes really worth it? Because it's unnatural. You're trying to put a unnatural thing into a natural body. That's something there. Then of course, all the blue eyes, the loss of the eyes. It's just all about foresight and a lot of eye symbolism. Yeah, so yeah, you really get to see Frank Herbert basically makes like the biggest straw man of religion that you would expect from atheists. I actually think if I didn't hear correctly, I think Frank Herbert's actually a Christian, and he like just took all of the even the intelligent atheists' arguments and their strawmans of what religion is, and he basically turned it into wrote it into his books and said, I'm going to make this atheist strawman religion actually the actual religion, and then we're going to show why that just is going to look nothing at all like Christianity, and that it and what it would lead to ultimately, which would be like an ultimate like galactic overlord jihad kind of thing. So yeah, another thing I liked about this book was the cover. It's actually a really nice cover. Like I like the cape flowing in the wind, the two moons, and the dune. It's I guess one of his foresights that he sees was the moon always falling, which I guess the moon would be his lady, Chani. So the moon falling, I guess that was what it is. It's his world falling, and that'd be relating to his wife. So yeah, that's about it. And then this could also be the final scene of the book where Paul gets out stranded in the desert by himself, blind, and willing to have the planet taken, because I think that Freemen in their religion see the planet as their enemy rather than as their great friend, their great mother, or whatever. They see it as their enemy, the Dune, which is what they call planet Arrakis, but still. And he was talking about how. So, anyways, once again, I'd say 4 out of 5. If you read the original Dune and you liked it, read that one. All right, this one here. So the first chapter, that's about as far as I got, was the first chapter before I decided to tap out of this book. Basically, first chapter, it's Stilgar doing a monologue, thinking about the two children, how they are unnatural, and how it's normal for what the Bene Gesserit call the people who like that, who are born with full consciousness. They call them abominations, because who knows what demon from the past could take over their being, because what's it like, whenever they're fully conscious, but their their parents and their ancestors are all living consciously in that body. So it's like, who knows what evil person in the past could take over the body, right? So they say it's best just to leave the dead, and yeah, which I mean, that's good. So that actually is a very intriguing plot. Like, that's like, oh, are these kids actually going to be monsters, or are they going to be like kind of like Paul, where it's just they don't like the responsibility, and he just kind of goes with it because he knows that it's unpreventable and whatnot. But still, in the first chapter, why I decided to tap out was because they said that Paul's two children, who I guess they said were 9 years old, were participating in the ritualistic Sitch, which is like the Freeman town orgies. And I was like, darn it. Why do you have to try to normalize this pedophile shit? Like, you can say it might have been implied a little bit in the previous books, but he never just outright just freaking said it. It's like, and even if you went into the plot of this book and like, oh no, they actually turned them into a bunch of monsters and it was bad all along. It's like, no, just don't write books about that stuff. Okay, we all know it's bad. So yeah, I finished the chapter. I think I read halfway through chapter 2, and I'm just like, no, that's too much. I'm not gonna waste my time reading a 600-page book that literally starts in the very first chapter with them saying that, oh yeah, these children, they're so because they're so conscious and they have all their ancestors in them, that they're a lot more mature than their age, and they're even participating in the sex rituals. It's like, I even went on to Google to see 1828 in Webster Dictionary to see okay, maybe he's going on some different definition of orgy, where it's like, okay. So then I went on to 1828 dictionary. I looked it up and saw the whatchamacallit, definition of orgies, and it was bacchanalian, which refers to the Greek god Bacchus. I mean, not Greek, Roman. I guess it would be not Demeter. What's his freaking name? Dionysus, which is basically, oh yeah, but like what that is whenever you have a bacchanalian feast, that's a big sex ritual. It's like where people, okay. So it's basically that's what it ended up being. I'm like, okay, I don't even want to see. I don't even care. Like everything that I thought was interesting about the plot, everything I wanted to learn, I was actually interested in. Just all of a sudden, I just don't care anymore because it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're writing us. Oh, part of this story is a weird like saying, oh, but the kids they can actually consent because they're old and because they're the previous their ancestors are living in them so that they can actually consent. It's like no, all right, so yeah, unfortunately, I'm not 100% turned off, but I'm definitely tapping out. If I ever pick this up again, I'm gonna pick it up with good reason that like if I hear from other people that oh it's not actually pedophile stuff, I I don't know. I'll do a little bit more research. But for now I'm tapping out of this series. I guess it's a good thing I didn't buy all 6 books. I only bought the first 3. Um, yeah, it's just why do you got to go there, man, Frank? I don't know. Now let's look this up real quick. Frank Herbert, um, religious views. Let's see. Let's see. Frank Herbert, Wikipedia. Let's see. Intersection of religion, politics, economic power. Yeah. Interstellar travel, thousands of worlds. Science fiction author, journalist. I mean, he actually has a really interesting past like that. He was basically like what you would think of like the 1890s like balloon adventurer kind of person. So that's kind of who he was. He just had early life, Dune, success, changes in death, criticism of government, ideas and themes. Posthumously published works. Dune is a landmark of soft science fiction. Deliberately suppressed technology in Dune so he could address the future of humanity rather than the future of humans' technology. Dune considers the way humans and their institutions might change over time. Hmm. That's actually pretty accurate, yeah, because he did the whole like robot thing that they mentioned here and there in the original book and here and there in the sequel. That like, oh yeah, there's this previous time where like the robots took over for a few thousand years, but then they eventually ended it all with religious jihad of just no more advanced computers. So, um, early life, maybe this is what's going on. Um, Ran away from home in 1938, lived with his aunt and uncle, poor home environment, North Salem High School. Um, all right, so he has daddy issues. That's generally a red flag for people who reject Christianity. Divorce, 1945. Daughter. Oh, he had a daughter and then he gets a divorce. Okay. And just, never graduated from the university. Yeah. Ideas and themes. Yeah. Um, yeah, like yeah. So, all right. All right. That's about all I have to say about that stuff. Have a good one.